St. Louis Cathedral has been a landmark for Catholics in New Orleans for more than 300 years. It's one of the city's most beautiful buildings. Seth Doan has some unique structures in his sights, half a world away.
They stick out from fields, line roads, and look almost alien. Yet these limestone structures called Trulli are a centuries-old part of Puglia's landscape here in Italy.
It's interesting driving around here. You see Trulli everywhere.
Yes, I love them. For a long time, nobody cares about Trulli. For like 100 years. What's better than this?
But that's changed, says Angelo Amorico.
There's no other place in the world.
He designs bespoke vacations through his company, Access Italy.
Alberobello is the one that has more Trulli than all the other little cities in Puglia.
Alberobello still has about 1,500 of these old homes and stables, 27 of which belong to Mimo Palmizzano's family. He runs a bar and is Amorico's Trulli guy.
What are we going to drink?
Wine.
He's also resident historian.
See, this is where I grew up. It's a nest.
If you can keep up.
When you fall asleep in a Trullo, it's deep rest, it's cozy, it's not common to sleep in a house that is 400 years old. This is exactly how they used to live in the Trulli.
They rent some of their Trulli and turned one into a museum.
Up into the cone, there was preservation of food. Food into the cone, far from cistern, under this house where we collect the rain.
Wait, you're going so fast. Wait.
Trullo is the singular.
Is an original,
Architect Giorgio Angela can use the plural, Trulli, in describing his Ostuni art resort with its luxury upgrades.
All the people, how can I sleep in Trullo? Because when you stay inside, you feel something new.
It's where Amorico sends his guests.
It's a magic experience because you match the past and the modern things in the same place.
These magical structures sat on the margins of Giorgio Spaluto's family vineyard for generations.
We see this building every day. It's not very special. But when people come from outside, they say, but this is very special.
Renovated, these Trulli are now key to their agritourism business.
Why were these built?
We don't know exactly. Some historians say that the people start to build this building just to not pay tax.
The story goes that to avoid taxes, owners could remove the top stones, claiming the Trullo was unfinished.
It's more a legend, I think.
Historically, these homes were for laborers, many of whom immigrated to America.
Okay, so you need to drive a bit forward on Strada Lama Nuova and then go to really
our
narrow street
research
on your
sent
left.
us on an unexpected side mission.
Like here somewhere,
Yeah.
right?
Like
It
around
turns
the
out
third.
I think this is it.
Yeah.
our producer, Michaela Bufano's great-grandfather, was born in a Trullo.
Breaking and entering.
Some digging led us here.
When we started the story, you had no idea there was a Trulli connection to your family.
No, I had no idea, and it's kind of amazing to be here.
Her ancestral home needs some work. A lot of them do.
This is the Trullo, the inside part, the structural part.
And that's keeping Enrico Camarda in business.
How many Trulli are on this site?
Around 25.
This will become a hotel with the help of a master trullaro.
It's like a puzzle.
Yes, it's like a puzzle.
Who pieces together 3 layers of stone. Smaller bits in the center help ventilation, while others keep out water.
There's no mortar, there's no cement, there's nothing sticking this together.
Just different shape of stones.
The way it's been done for centuries.
Yes.
After decades of neglect, these structures are seeing a revival, fueled by tourists drawn to their charm. And the locals
I'm a little bit thirsty. You make me talking too much.
Exactly.
determined to save and celebrate their history.
We rock.
Salute, salute.
We don't like un poco, we like a lot.
Tanto.
Salute.
From homes with style to sneakers with soul. With Luke Burbank, we take flight.
Just last week in Queens, New York, more than 200 people lined up to pay $200 for a shoe most of them already owned. The Nike Air Jordan. The most successful basketball shoe in history turns 40 this year, and yet it almost didn't happen.
He did not want to be there. And he had told his agent, I'm not going.
Howard White was in the room back in 1984 when Michael Jordan, then a rookie short on NBA experience but long on potential, was basically dragged to Oregon by his parents to meet with a relatively small sneaker company called Nike.
This is bigger than anything that we've done. You know, typically a great player would get like $100,000, but this was so unique in terms of just doing it.
The offer, $2.5 million to wear their shoes, triple what anyone else in the league was making.
Air Jordan by Nike.
Jordan took the deal, and the rest is sneaker history.
Nothing's hotter.
When Nike launched the Air Jordans back in 1985, they hoped to sell $3 million worth of product. Instead, they sold $126 million in 1 year.
There's a kaboom.
Look out.
What a jam! Here's Jordan down the middle all the way.
Much of that success was thanks to Jordan's incredible play on the court.
Kaboom! And that's what they came to see, didn't they?
But there was also Nike's marketing approach, which was groundbreaking in its own right, joining the cultural conversation in ways few commercials for basketball shoes ever had.
It's gotta be a shoe. It's gotta be a shoe. Shoe.
And don't forget the shoe's design itself, a process that managed to blend sports technology with a set of aesthetic principles that would make Jordans as much a fashion statement as a basketball shoe, as evidenced by the Christian Dior Jordans Howard White was wearing for our interview, which retail for up to $17,000.
In order to translate what he did as a man into what we do as a brand, you have to start with a series of principles. We call them ethos.
40 years later, that design work falls to Jason Maiden, Chief Design Officer for the Jordan brand, which these days is a standalone division within Nike that generates some $7 billion a year by itself.
You first start with connectivity, why this product has relevance and reverence. Then you put that into a very strict process that we call visioneering. And so what's interesting is we have a playbook. I can't show you what's in it.
But you can show me the outside?
I can show you the cover. It's beautiful. So
if you could peek inside, you'd probably see one of the designs for their yearly Air Jordan release. That's right, Nike has been putting out a new pair of Jordans every year for the last 39 years.
Does a lot of the stuff that your team designs, does Michael Jordan get eyes on it still, a lot of it? Like how central is he to the operation here in 2025, 40 years in?
Oh, he's very integral. He's very integral to the operation. He sees everything. He trusts us a lot. He has opinions on things that are near and dear to him.
It has given me my life's purpose.
Legendary. Sean Williams founded the Social Studies Community Academy in Brooklyn, a program dedicated to studying, promoting, and collecting shoes.
Sneakers are wearable art. You're giving the sneakers a level of depth and AKA storytelling that convinces the consumer that they're making the right purchase when they buy these sneakers.
But for Howard White, who still works at Nike and still talks to Michael Jordan often, the Air Jordan success is because it's not actually the story of a shoe. It's the story of something much bigger.
It's totally transcended basketball at this point, right?
There have been a lot of basketball shoes. It's not about basketball. And if this simple article of footwear can make people interpret themselves in a way that gives them just the power to believe more in themselves, that's what the Jordan brand is about.
You've probably seen pictures of the mob which stormed the American embassy in Saigon, desperate to find a way out in the final hours of the Vietnam War. But maybe you haven't heard the radio transmissions of the American pilots who pulled off the largest helicopter evacuation in history. I know I hadn't until we found some of them in the Marine Corps archives.
Okay, well, let's pick it up here. Looks like things are about to close up, and we want to be able to give them the support they need. Go ahead and max it out.
That's the airborne commander directing helos into both the embassy and Tan Son Nhut Airport outside Saigon to pick up hundreds of Americans and thousands of Vietnamese.
Roger, find out for sure how many aircraft Alamo needs at this time.
Alamo is the call sign for the airport, which was being shelled by advancing North Vietnamese troops.
Okay, they're on the way with their feet wet at this time, and we'll have them there as soon as possible.
Feet wet means the helos are still over the South China Sea, flying from aircraft carriers off the coast.
Okay, 2 more 53s as soon as possible.
53s are CH-53s, the largest of the helicopters.
Okay, I understand. Dash 1 and Dash 2 are fully loaded. That's a roger, then we got a big load again. Copy, about 60 per air, at least.
70 helicopters shuttling between ships and shore.
Everything's blinking and turning. Please pass to all aircraft coming inbound. They must come on with a rotating beacon. On to final. We're at a power with aircraft trying to land on each other.
2 Marines at the airport have been killed by North Vietnamese shelling, and the helicopters are in danger of being shot down.
Be advised, we're having many reports of AAA airburst at altitude and also lots of muzzle flashes with no associated tracers.
The airport, also known as Alamo, is becoming too dangerous.
Alamo says 10 more lifts and that's it. 10 more lifts. Roger, understand. 10 more lifts.
That leaves the embassy as the only way out of Saigon.
26 Bravo, proceed inbound towards the embassy area. I believe that's the area I can use you in.
But the embassy is under siege by a panicked crowd.
Okay, be advised, as I understand it, there's 2,000 uncontrollable people in the courtyard. You want to put a 53 in there?
I actually landed at the embassy about 1 o'clock.
Jerry Berry is the first pilot to land at the embassy, setting down in the parking lot. His call sign, Lady Ace 09.
This is Lady Ace 09, Roger. We're outbound at this time with our passengers. How many passengers? Lady Ace 09 has 18 on board. Lady Ace 01 has 20. Roger, 120, copy, good.
Berry flew a CH-46 helicopter.
How many people does it carry? 25 combat troops. So if you carried Vietnamese who are much smaller and they weren't carrying any bags, we would put 50 to 60 on there when we'd carry them out.
The CH-46 is light enough to land on the embassy roof, opening up a second landing zone inside the crowded compound.
Land on the rooftop of the embassy, over.
Up on the roof, an attempting target.
Also felt that there was probably a lot of North Vietnamese that had infiltrated the city earlier. I felt we could have been taken out probably if somebody wanted to at about any time. It was very, very scary when you landed on that roof and you could see all those people down below.
The rooftop is also where Marine guards are burning mountains of classified documents.
The embassy's got a large fire on the rooftop at this time. They're loading people at this time. Lady H-14 is in it.
Glitches are inevitable.
The last 2 that went in there on Swift 2-1 flight, no one got aboard. There was nobody on the rooftop.
The helos don't have time to wait.
A helicopter has so much flight time. You could only fly a CH-46 about 2 hours.
It's about 40 minutes each way from the ships to the embassy, not counting the time it takes to load.
I was unable to make any contact with anybody or get down into any of the zones. I'm now bingo fuel.
Bingo is pilot talk for low on fuel.
But now the weather gets bad. It's about 7:30, 8 in the evening. Weather comes in and it's going a little slower.
We got bad weather in the area. Are you above or below the cloud deck at this time? Sir, we're below the cloud deck at this time. Okay, now I suggest you stay in the below the cloud deck.
I'm flying up the Saigon River at about maybe 150 feet because the weather's closing in. And that's when I thought, there's got to be all kinds of wires across this river. So you pull back on this and you climb like mad. The heart stopped beating for a minute because it was dark, couldn't see anything.
And the North Vietnamese are getting closer.
I can see the tanks coming down the road.
You could see the tanks.
North Vietnamese tanks because their lights are on. They're driving down the highway.
You are to land on the rooftop and deliver a message. I say again, to deliver a message. All U.S. must come out now.
Until now, Ambassador Graham Martin has refused to leave.
I land on the embassy roof at 4:56 in the morning on 30 April 1975, and I called the Marine security guard over, and I said, You go tell the ambassador this helicopter's not leaving the roof until he's on board. And then my best aviator voice, I said, the president sends.
Order from the president. Did you have authority to?
I have no authority to do that at all. But, I mean, there's got to be an end here. 2 minutes later, his whole entourage are up, they're ready to go.
The ambassador brings the American flag with him. Did it feel to you then, hey, the war is over?
Certainly, it did. You go through this thing in your brain right away was this all for naught? Did we lose the 58,000 plus Americans? Hope for something.
Barry flies the ambassador to one of the ships offshore, only to find that the war is not over.
Well, now you have to go back and get the Marines.
We've got Swift 3-3 and Swift 2-2. Choppers going into the embassy to pick up the last Americans there. There should be about 33 to 35 of them left.
The Marines who guard the embassy are barricaded on the roof.
We thought for sure that we were going to be left there, kind of swallow hard, you know, because by that time the tanks were passing by from the Vietnamese.
Juan Valdez, now 87 and in assisted living, is the sergeant in charge. Jerome Thomas is one of his Marines.
The question that was going through everybody's mind was, should we fight or should we surrender? And everybody there to a man was like, we're fighting, you know, because Marines never surrender.
We were there for 2.5, maybe 3 hours waiting, and then all of a sudden, at a distance, we saw 2 choppers coming back.
According to the count they gave me, it should be 2-5 remaining. I'll tell you, Wes, it looked like 425 down there to me. I recommend that you pick up as many as you can when you go in. We had an underestimate on report before, and this is why we had to scramble YouTube. So try to pick up as many as you can, and also when you come off, give us a good head count of how many is left for 2-2 to pick up. Roger, we'll do what we can. We better pick up 22 on board, and there's 10 left for Swift 2-2 to pick up.
Actually, there are 11 left to be picked up by the final helo, Swift 22.
All souls on board, all souls on board. Understand, 11 packs on board with the commander.
I was the last one to go aboard.
Swift 2-2 says he is out with 11 packs on board, including the commander. All the Americans are out. That is it.
In American literary history, few novels have loomed as large as F. Scott Fitzgerald's 1925 classic, The Great Gatsby. Lee Cowan takes us back in time.
Dotting the water's edge of Long Island's Manhasset Bay, the opulence of the homes speaks for itself, but not nearly as well as F. Scott Fitzgerald once spoke of that opulence.
A breeze blew through the room, blew curtains in at one end and out the other like pale flags, twisting them up toward the frosted wedding cake of the ceiling.
That wedding cake of a ceiling likely did look down on Gatsby-esque parties back in the day.
The bar is in full swing, and floating rounds of cocktails permeate the garden outside until the air is alive with chatter and laughter and casual innuendo.
I can almost hear the music playing and feel the spirits of, the parties that went on here.
Fitzgerald lived in a much more modest house just a few miles away while he was writing The Great Gatsby. Elena and George Scheedinger, though, believe he must have visited here. They imagine him while tilting his head back to down a bootleg cocktail. Fitzgerald took note and then wrote their ceiling into his novel.
I absolutely believe that to be true.
That Fitzgerald was here.
Yeah.
His novel came out 100 years ago this month. Scholars consider it a literary masterpiece. Hollywood finds it irresistible.
How do you do, old sport? I'm Gatsby.
And so does Broadway. There's even a recent graphic novel of Gatsby that brings Fitzgerald's characters to life. Starting with James Gatz. He believed he was too poor to marry the rich girl of his dreams. So he reinvents himself.
I'm afraid I haven't been a very good host, old sport. You see, I'm Gatsby.
It's less about love and more about longing, his especially, for Daisy Buchanan, just across the bay.
I don't want to go home.
And don't.
They were so near, and yet worlds apart.
I hadn't realized that either side of the bay was, that they were so close to one another, and that you really, I mean, you almost could look into the windows on the other side.
That's Blake Hazard, the great-granddaughter of Scott and Zelda Fitzgerald. That's her grandmother as a baby. They are celebrated relatives who she says are looming lovingly large on this centennial.
I've gotten used to witnessing these kinds of things about my family, about my great-grandfather, with other people, and sharing it, and I think that feels right.
Many, many places inspired Scott.
Gatsby tours have become popular.
This is where The Great Gatsby is set.
This one run by Kevin C. Fitzpatrick, an author and New York historian.
There's a point where we're in the middle of Manhasset Bay, and you can look to the left to West Egg and to the right to East Egg, and people, it just clicks, because they can picture that green light on that dock.
Few of those mansions remain. Most never survived the Great Depression. Torn down to make room for the new. But back in Manhattan, some of the Gatsby lore remains, especially here at the Plaza Hotel.
There's a story that Zelda would come in here and just go round and round and round.
It was a temple to the times where important people did important things, including Blake's great-grandparents.
They both really wanted to be in the world, of the world, writing about what they saw, chronicling it all, and
having a good time doing it.
And having a great time doing it.
The Fitzgeralds were not wealthy themselves. While they did enjoy money, they were amused with its perils, too.
They were careless people, Tom and Daisy. They smashed up things and creatures and then retreated back into their money or their vast carelessness or whatever it was that kept them together.
He was drawn to these things, but also very much an observer of them, felt very outside of, certainly of the wealthy set.
He did rub elbows with the wealthy set at Princeton. Although he later dropped out, his papers found their way back.
Let's take a look.
Oh, wow.
Including the only surviving handwritten manuscript of Gatsby.
Here we have entire, half a page scribbled out. The whole book is like this.
Emma Sarconi is a rare book librarian at Princeton's Special Collections at the Firestone Library.
He was very exacting as to what he wanted the book to be.
At the time, Fitzgerald was coming off 2 big hits, and he believed that Gatsby would surpass both of them. But Gatsby landed with a thud.
How many copies did it originally sell?
Less than 20,000.
Jeez.
Yeah.
How did he react to the mixed reviews?
He was devastated. He wrote a letter to his daughter Scotty sort of in his final years, lamenting the fact that none of her friends would know who he was.
So what changed? Well, the times, perhaps. During World War II, the newly formed Council on Books in Wartime shipped millions of pocket-sized books to keep the troops entertained overseas.
This copy is relatively small,
including 155,000 copies of The Great Gatsby.
We wouldn't be talking about this book today if this edition hadn't come out.
Fitzgerald died long before that, at the age of 44. At that point, he thought he was a failure.
He had really fallen into obscurity. Famously, very few people attended his funeral.
And yet today, Gatsby rubs dust jackets with the likes of Jane Austen, Steinbeck, and Hemingway. For many, The Great Gatsby is indeed the great American novel.
It sounds silly, but I wish Scott could be here. I just think he'd be so thrilled.
Yeah. And surprised, probably,
and
right?
Surprised. Certainly surprised.
Among the few keepsakes that Blake has are her great-grandmother's necklace, given to Zelda by Scott, as well as this ring. Coincidence the stone is green? Well, we'll never know.
Gatsby believed in the green light,
that haunting green light blinks for all of us. Dreams, perfection, whatever eludes us, we still keep trying.
So we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past.
Mo Rocca starts us off this morning with a trip back in time to America's revolutionary past.
The Allied ring is relentlessly tightening around the Reich.
Newsreels tell the story of World War II. The early still photography of Matthew Brady chronicles the horrors of the Civil War. But with the American Revolution, which began 250 years ago this month, it can be harder to appreciate the life and death stakes in the colonists' fight for freedom. What did it feel like in Lexington and Concord, the two Massachusetts towns, where one April day in 1775, the Patriots and British Redcoats first exchanged fire?
Do you all think a lot about what the mood was like early that morning on April 19th?
We discuss it a lot. We read accounts, we read diaries.
Larissa Saskin, William Rose, and John Nichols are members of the Lexington Minutemen Reenactors Group.
Can you understand how upset they were?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
It's impossible for me, as someone who was born in the 80s, to ever imagine what it had been like to have my freedoms taken as much as theirs were. To be pushed into that proverbial corner where my only choice is to fight the world's best army.
When we think about the revolution, most people, they start with, the taxes, the Stamp Act, the Townsend duties, back in the 1760s. By the time you get to 1775, it's a whole different ballgame.
By that point, the mother country and her Massachusetts colony were beyond estranged, says Jim Hollister, a park ranger at Minuteman National Historical Park. Parliament had imposed onerous taxes without representation, sent thousands of British troops to occupy Boston, and, most egregiously, had stripped Massachusetts of the power to govern itself, power it had enjoyed for nearly a century.
What gets somebody, living a comfortable life to then take the most dramatic action?
Do they feel humiliated?
Absolutely. Humiliated and threatened.
On April 18, 1775, 700 British soldiers began marching 18 miles through the night from Boston to Concord to seize arms that had been stockpiled by Patriot militiamen.
There's not supposed to be a Massachusetts army. That is treason.
Punishable by?
By death, really.
So they're really taking a risk.
They are taking a huge risk.
About halfway between Boston and Concord, the town of Lexington, which happened to be where two future founding fathers, Sam Adams and John Hancock, were lying low. Hancock was one of the wealthiest men in the colonies and a major financier of the Patriot cause. Adams had helped plan the Boston Tea Party.
Paul Revere rides into town at about what time?
He gets here at about 11:30 p.m.
Yes, Paul Revere, who famously sounded the alarm about the approaching Redcoats.
John Hancock, Sam Adams, and Paul Revere were standing right here. A chill runs up your spine.
According to the Lexington History Museum's Sarah McDonough, Revere made a special stop here to urge Adams and Hancock to flee.
John was very hesitant to leave. There are men outside who are going to fight the might of the British Empire. He wants to be a part of that. He sees himself as a leader, and he very much was. Sam Adams was said to have sort of placed his hand on John's shoulder and said, "We don't belong here."
The two leaders escaped under cover of darkness as 77 brave Patriot militiamen stood guns drawn at sunrise on April 19th as the world's most vaunted army approached. It's not known who fired the first shot, but one thing is clear.
It does not go well for the Patriots with this first battle.
No, not at all.
The colonists scattered, 8 of them killed, a terrible toll for this tight-knit community.
All of these people were intimately connected, which makes the wave of grief that much worse because everyone lost someone.
Now word is radiating. They've killed our people in Lexington. So the militiamen that are turning out after that are infuriated.
Jim Hollister showed us where those Minutemen, called so because they were ready at a moment's notice, gathered later that morning.
And they're up on the top of that hill. There's over 400 of them.
To take on the Redcoats as they arrived at Concord's North Bridge.
Then a shot rings out from the British side by all accounts, and then a second and a third. And one of the Minutemen is grazed in the forehead, and then Major Buttrick gives the fateful order, fire, for God's sake, fire. And that was the first time that a colonial officer ordered his Minutemen to fire on the King's soldiers. Once the Minutemen open fire, the casualties in the British are very heavy, and they just break and they run.
There's no turning back.
There's no turning back. And for the Minutemen, imagine seeing the backs of British soldiers running from you.
Throughout their grueling 18-mile retreat, the Redcoats took fire from a growing number of colonial militiamen fighting from behind rocks and trees. This was terrain the Patriots knew well. It was now the British suffering humiliation. By the time their day ended in Boston, more than 70 of them were dead and hundreds more injured.
What changed that day?
The idea that the crisis could be settled peacefully. The idea that they were going to be able to return to their normal lives. The world that they knew was gone.
The following month, the Second Continental Congress convened in Philadelphia. There, delegates, including John Hancock and Sam Adams, appointed George Washington the commander of the newly formed Continental Army. The Revolutionary War had begun. And for reenactor William Rose, himself a military veteran, the story of that fateful April day will always be worth retelling.
Bring those guns up. Maybe no one will remember me 50 years from now, but if some kid remembers me because I gave him a great story that he can relate to, think about the immigrants, 1607 Jamestown, or 1620 Plymouth, or 20 minutes ago in the southern border or anyplace else. They're coming here for a reason, for the ability to not have somebody else having a boot on your neck. If we can get rid of all the nonsense, the red and the blue and the value judgments, and just look at that reason, that's what America stands for. And if I can convince one little kid that this is the place to keep striving for that, then that kid can be us dressed up in another 50 years.
Leaders of some 50 nations are in France today, celebrating a moment that some thought would never come. The reopening of the landmark Cathedral Notre Dame. Seth Doan is in Paris.
Those indelible images of a burning cathedral against the Parisian skyline were also burned into our memory. But the heartbreak of that day, when seemingly all was lost, has given way to a resurrection of sorts. With a ritual knocking, the Archbishop of Paris marked the reopening of Notre Dame Saturday night, just 5 years after the fire, unveiling a restoration perhaps as extraordinary as was the destruction itself. At the gleaming Gothic monument, French President Emmanuel Macron hosted world leaders and luminaries, among them Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, Britain's Prince William, and President-elect Donald Trump. Macron triumphant after the successful completion of his audacious 5-year renovation deadline. Last summer, we were granted rare access to the cathedral.
They've been removing the scaffolding, but we're still about 100 feet up in the air.
It's a national challenge.
Philip Jost was in charge of meeting Macron's deadline.
The schedule, the time, 5 years, but we needed that.
Why?
To mobilize. It's such a challenge, you see. and challenge unified people. We do here things we have never done since 150 years perhaps. Such a spire to build such big roofs with oak and lead. We were not sure workers would be able.
You know now, but it was a question.
It was a question.
To rebuild, they first had to stabilize the 12th century monument, encasing it in scaffolding. Then 21st century tools, drones, and computer animations were used to study and guide the reconstruction. This they're not calling a sprinkler, but a mister. It's the first of its kind in a cathedral in France. If there were to be a fire in the future, a mist would come out here and help fight that fire. It was among the changes meant to prevent a repeat of the 2019 fire, which investigators believe was an accident.
They put massive metal trusses here to divide the roof into 3 sections, making it less likely for a fire to spread.
Amid such a grand reconstruction, Thomas Lefebvre was among the army of artisans working on the smallest of scales, cutting these decorative lead details for the roof.
This is done on site at the last minute.
Yes, all the piece here, it's different, so we have to do handmade.
Everything by hand?
Yeah.
Do you forget where you are? Way up in the air.
No, yes, we forget this.
Around 2,000 people helped rebuild. A foundry in Normandy retuned the bells, which rang out again this weekend. And some scoured forests for centuries-old oak.
They had to find 1,000 pieces of this French oak to rebuild the spire. We're really at the heart of it now. They call this a masterpiece of French carpentry.
Help came from across France. At Guédelon in the Burgundy region, they're building a castle from scratch. And a handful of workers applied skills sharpened here to the effort in Paris.
And the weekend,
Marilyn Martin is co-founder of this experiment-turned-tourist attraction.
French carpenters who want to do the job in Notre Dame call us and come to learn how to cut the wood as the medieval techniques with the medieval tools.
And at the Mobilier National in Paris, paintings once covered in soot were on display before being returned to Notre Dame. Oriane Levitte was curator.
It was a disaster, the fire, but in some way there is a luck because we have the funds to restore 22 canvas.
Luck, you call it?
In part luck, because it was horrible for all of us. But we could restore all this painting because of the fire and because there is a lot of money to do the restoration.
Nearly $900 million was raised from 150 countries, including around 40,000 donors in the U.S.
You can see the before and after so clearly.
Yes, one of the aims of the exhibition is to show to people the work of restoration on the canvas. And then, after restoration, you have like the revelation of colors.
It is so much more colorful.
The newly cleaned interior of the cathedral is now markedly lighter. In this side chapel, a restorer was retouching where centuries of grime had been removed.
Looking around is incredible. There are these bright colors that have been revealed just from cleaning.
It's true, restorer Charlotte Falouza told us. Everything was black, and by doing a simple cleaning, we could already find the original colors.
Here you will have...
When we first saw the renovation underway, retired French Army General Jean-Louis Jojolin was in charge. He pointed out the cavity where the spire once was.
This is the heart of the drama here.
The last time we were here, we were standing just on the other side there, looking down into a gaping hole. That hole was where the spire now stands. It's been completely rebuilt.
The general died in a hiking accident last year. Philippe Jost had been his number 2.
It was a big shock for all of us, but we knew that it was what he would have wanted for us, to continue the work.
How important was it to respect the original, to try to rebuild as close to the way it was as possible?
It's what we owe to this monument.
You owe it to the monument.
You owe it to
make
the
it as
monument.
original as possible?
Exactly.
Jost calls this a monument with a soul. As it opens to the public, this painstaking renovation proves a testament to human innovation, past and present. France's president praised the firefighters, engineers, and craftspeople as he declared the bells of Notre Dame are ringing again.
You say you didn't quite make it to Italy this summer? No worries. With Seth Doane, we're off to a site that's truly an underground sensation.
This primeval place of caves carved into the cliffs is a chameleon of sorts in cinema. Standing in is the ancient Holy Land in Passion of the Christ, or the remake of Ben-Hur. And making a modern-day cameo as itself in James Bond, No Time to Die. These winding roads, historically without the speeding Aston Martin, snake through the hillside town of Matera in southern Italy's Basilicata region. A good backdrop for even those just pretending to be in the movies as kids.
It was a big playground. We felt like Indiana Jones exploring empty caves.
Indiana Jones running around through these little streets.
Vito Rondinone grew up in what's called the Sassi.
Sassi in Italian literally means stones, but here in Matera by Sassi we are referring to two ancient neighborhoods of the old town. Their main feature is that behind almost all the buildings there is a cave.
How old is this place?
Here are remains of Neolithic villages that date back to more than 6,000 years ago. From that time, man has probably never left this place.
UNESCO declared it a World Heritage Site in 1993, noting Matera was first inhabited during the Paleolithic period, showing continuous human occupation through several millennia.
Why were people digging into the hillsides here?
Because the rock is very soft.
Rondinone, who's a guide with tours by locals, showed us the simple cave his dad uses to age wine.
Salute.
Salute.
And the far more spectacular.
Here we are in one of the most fascinating caves of the Sassi. It's a church. It's one of the so-called rock churches. So as you can see, it's completely dug out of the rock.
A vast centuries-old network of cisterns to collect rain and spring water allowed the city to develop and endure.
You can stay in a cave where our ancestors lived thousands of years ago.
Those ancestors, however, were not living like this.
We tried to restore the original cave dwellings and converted them into hotel rooms.
Michele Centonze is a manager at the luxury hotel Sextanzio.
This is the executive suite number 13.
They offer tourists the chance to glimpse another era.
You have to imagine that in the past, it used to be a big house for a family of 10, 12 people with donkeys, animals.
This stable turned suite now goes for upwards of $1,500 a night.
We try to be as much respectful of the identity of the place as possible.
Yet in the 1950s, Matera was having an identity crisis with a reputation for being the shame of Italy. During the country's post-war economic slump, Carlo Levi, a famous writer, detailed the squalid conditions, humans and animals living together in caves.
He compared the Sassi to a circle of the Dante's hell. So
a circle of Dante's hell.
Yeah, it's a very strong description, but also thanks to that description, the spotlight on this strange city turned on.
A local museum recreates how families lived until Italy's government relocated most of the population to modern homes in the 1950s. For decades, much of the Sassi sat empty.
There's still a lot that needs to be developed here.
Yeah, a lot of caves that were abandoned in the 1950s, and they are so expensive to be restored.
That's something restaurateur and entrepreneur Michaela Bandini sure knows.
It's a unique place to work.
It is. It's a unique place to work, and then you find these, these crazy surprises. I mean, you like move a brick and you find cisterns.
What do you do when you find a cistern and you're renovating a bar or restaurant?
The easiest thing is to pretend you actually didn't find a cistern. Because
Are you really telling me that on camera?
Because it is so complicated.
Bandini, who's South African, fell in love with the man from Matera and then with the town itself.
How much has life changed here in the 30 years you've been in Matera?
Wow, how much can life change?
She's been a part of that, opening the hip bar, Area 8.
Cheers.
She invited us for aperitivo. Their bartender crafts his own gin and ice.
Matera as a city, you'll find it on a bucket list of travelers all over the world who really, really want to come here and live the cave experience. Sleep in a cave, eat in a cave.
Or have a drink in a cave, in your case.
Absolutely.
These cliffside caves, settlements for millennia, are drawing a new generation of filmmakers, tourists, and business owners, sparking a rebirth while celebrating the past.
Now it's incredible how the same reason why the city was labeled as the shame of Italy, now it's the pride.
Seth Doan found the perfect angle for this postcard from Italy.
They come from all over to get that same shot.
Do you get tired as a guide of taking that picture?
Sometimes, yes.
Massimo Lenzi says the Leaning Tower is the only site most visitors ask him to see in Pisa, this jewel of a town in Tuscany.
In the past, the people, they don't care. It's just something wrong.
This is something of interest to modern tourists.
Yes.
The bell tower started leaning when it was still under construction. Engineers of the 12th and 13th centuries tried making adjustments, but uneven soil was no match for so much marble.
Are people who come to Pisa aware that there are other leaning towers in Italy?
No, they don't think in there are other leaning towers.
So just imagine how the people of Bologna feel, which has its own leaning tower. Ever heard of Garisenda? Famed poet Dante Alighieri wrote about it a good 800 years ago, noting while trying to admire the taller, less lopsided Asinelli Tower, he was distracted by its leaning neighbor, Garisenda. Today, it's making global headlines after being closed for safety reasons. It's leaning even more than that other tower that hogs so much attention.
The strange thing is that from the engineering point of view, the constructions become famous when something goes wrong. For instance, a tower that tilts is famous.
Professor Paolo Foraboschi has built a career stabilizing towers across Italy. He explains Bologna's skyline was once filled with them.
We would have looked out here in medieval times and seen 100 of these towers?
Yes, to show that you are rich, you buy a huge car or a boat. In the past, you built a tower.
But in those days, height could win out over structural soundness.
We discovered this summer from some data that the movement of the tower was different.
Matteo Lepore is Bologna's mayor. Last fall, he made the decision to temporarily close the tower.
Do you worry that it actually could fall over?
No. A medieval tower is a strange thing. It's a sort of a body, no? And we have to take care of it with the awareness that in this time, we for sure decide not to build a tower like that.
They're still studying what to do and are looking west toward Pisa. In 1990, the tower there was closed for about a decade. They used cables and weights and removed 77 tons of soil to stop it from leaning a little too much.
I was involved exactly for the same problem in Pisa.
But a different cause may merit a different solution, says engineer Massimo Majanetsky. He's now working with industrial engineer Raffaella Bruni.
Lo stiamo valutando proprio in questo periodo.
We're evaluating various possibilities, Bruni told us, ranging from building a perimeter protection exterior to supporting it by holding it. Or there's the hypothesis of temporarily shortening it.
So one of the options is actually to lower the tower.
Yes, you know that in the 14th century, they removed 12 meters. Today, we say, well, we may apply the same system.
Today, it stands about 150 feet high. When it was shortened centuries ago, it was lowered brick by brick. Whatever today's solution is, they figure it'll cost at least $20 million.
Why are you raising money for these towers?
Because I woke up and I read what was happening in my city, and I felt not only the urgency, but the sense of responsibility and the opportunity of taking care of something that is going to be forever.
Chef Michele Massari grew up just blocks from Garisenda, but now lives in New York City.
So tonight is a dinner about New York and Bologna, towers and skyscrapers.
He opened his restaurant, Lucciola, on Manhattan's Upper West Side for a dinner fundraiser in February.
And ready.
On the menu, an edible bit of Bologna's cultural heritage.
Should we try it? I got a spoon here for you.
Tortellini.
I think most Americans are surprised knowing there are so many leaning towers in Italy.
Do you think it started because we have such a great food?
Those structural problems, of course, are not diet-related. Back in Bologna, Mayor Matteo Lepore hopes all this attention may have an unintended plus.
I know that Pisa is more famous than Bologna in general, but I hope that with this occasion could be the new tilting tower.
So a little tilting is good in a way for business.
Yeah.
In medieval times, these towers were built as defensive structures. Today, they're at the center of a friendlier sort of competition.
Have you spoken with the mayor of Pisa?
Only a few messages, good luck.
Good luck.
Yes.
Something really big just happened to something really big in the hills over Hollywood. Luke Burbank tells us all about it.
No one thought things would turn out the way they did. It was just that back in 1923, real estate developers S.H. Woodruff and Tracy Schultz had a problem.
So most people were living in downtown LA, south of Wilshire, and they came up with this gimmick of how do we attract people from downtown LA into the Hollywood Hills to buy land.
Sales for their new housing development nestled at the foot of the Santa Monica Mountains were sluggish. So businessman Jeff Zeranim says they had an idea.
They came up with this gigantic sign that said Hollywood Land. It was only supposed to last about 18 months.
That 18 months has stretched out to 100 years. A story only Hollywood could write, a temporary real estate ad that's become one of the most iconic images on planet Earth.
Here we go.
And it's still here, thanks to Zeranim and his fellow members of the Hollywood Sign Trust.
Some people ask me, how do you get this job? It's not really a job. It's a volunteer position. There's no pay in maintaining the Hollywood sign. I do this for the love of Hollywood and for the sheer joy of doing it.
Part of why the sign is so iconic, the sheer number of times it's shown up in movies and TV over the years.
And a perfect spot for the starting line of the amazing race.
The Hollywood sign has also drawn countless dreamers to Los Angeles over the years, looking for their moment in the spotlight, which is where Adam Burke comes in.
Hollywood Land was really about putting LA on the map as being one of the creative capitals of the world. So it was really designed to become what it really has become, which is a global marquee for not just LA, but for the film and television industry.
Burke runs the LA Tourism and Convention Board and thinks this might be the most valuable sign in the world.
Last year alone, visitors to the broader LA area generated $34.5 billion of business sales to our local community.
Some of which ends up in Chris Nye's pocket.
I have a first aid kit and will deal with anything. There are no bathrooms on the hike.
Nye is a tour guide who leads groups of excited tourists up to a spot near the sign on most days. He says those tourists are excited because seeing the sign is like seeing a celebrity.
They need something, sort of a cliche to say, you know, live from Los Angeles or from Hollywood, so they keep taking the same picture of these 9 stupid letters on the side of Mount Lee over and over and over again, and that's why it's become so iconic.
Now, you say 9 stupid letters, but you're leading tours up there, so you must think it's pretty cool.
Well, what I enjoy is the enthusiasm that people have of seeing the sign for the first time and sharing that with people.
Is this the only way down to the letters?
This is it, man.
We were enthusiastic as well, and thanks to Jeff Zaranim, our CBS crew was allowed to go
Sidestep.
All right, down to the sign. I assume this is how Clark Gable used to do it.
Yeah, I never saw him do it, though. This is where it really sinks in to see how
my goodness.
large these letters are.
Wow. Amazing.
There you have it. From down below, you think that all the letters are in the same plane, but you can see that they're all offset from one another.
In fact, it's that undulation determined by the hillside that allows the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce to trademark the sign. Otherwise, it would just be a word.
You can really see from this angle that they're not in the same plane. They're all, you know, kind of facing in different directions.
The first version of the sign was made of wood and sheet metal and covered in thousands of lights. But by 1944, high winds and weather had taken their toll.
Some of the letters had fallen over, the H had fallen down. It said Hollywoodland for a long time.
By the late 1970s, the letters L-A-N-D were long gone, and the sign was in grave disrepair. So the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce went looking for $250,000 to replace it, and got the money from some unlikely benefactors.
First person who actually stepped up to the plate was Alice Cooper.
The rock star.
The rock star, up-and-coming rock star. Alice Cooper is the first one to donate $27,777.
As did Hugh Hefner, publisher of Playboy, Andy Williams, the singer, actor, and cowboy Gene Autry, and the guy who invented that car price guide, the Kelley Blue Book.
This is the entire crew of the guys that worked on the Hollywood sign in 1978. So all of their names are welded into the I-beam of the O.
Of course, this is Hollywood, home of the facelift, and the Hollywood sign has had its share over the years. Do you think it's going to be here 100 years from now?
100%. The audaciousness of the project, to me, is really still symbolic of the way LA approaches anything. We don't do things halfway. It's really go big or go home.
As it turns 100, the Hollywood sign is, as they say around here, ready for its next close-up.
And now a page from our Sunday Morning Almanac. December 15th, 2001, 18 years ago today. A day of, let's just say, realignment for one of the world's most recognizable and beloved landmarks. For that was the day Italy's renowned Leaning Tower of Pisa reopened to the public after an 11-year renovation.
201.
Analysts had determined that after more than 800 years, the tower was at a sort of tipping point, that its famous lean was a lot more hazardous than many suspected. Engineer John Burland sounded the alarm.
The masonry in the tower, particularly on the leaning side, the south side, is very fragile, very high forces in it, and that could explode at any time.
Literally explode?
It could literally go bang and blow up.
Engineers faced the daunting task of fortifying the tower's fragile structure while maintaining its signature slant. While they weren't busy striking a pose, tourists had mixed success, suggesting a strategy of their own.
Push it.
I really wouldn't know where to begin.
Something to balance it out.
Something to push it?
Lift it up from underneath.
In the end, engineers employed a complex array of drills, weights, and cables to reduce the tower's 15-foot tilt by about 17 inches, or 1/2 of 1 degree, keeping the all-important tilt intact. And if the job's $25 million price tag seems a little steep for a seemingly minor repair, well, perhaps CBS newsman Winston Burdett put it best.
The lean, of course, is essential. If you take the lean from the Leaning Tower, how many people will still come here to see it?
Gatsby stood in the center of the crimson carpet and gazed around with fascinated eyes. Daisy watched him and laughed her sweet, exciting laugh. A tiny gust of powder rose from her bosom into the air.
That's the voice of the late Alexander Scourby, reading from The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. The popularity of his jazz-era novel endures to this day, but as Serena Altschul tells us, the same cannot be said for a glamorous house that is said to have inspired it.
Just yesterday morning, on the north shore of Long Island, New York, a magnificent old home was knocked to the ground. Yet this is not your ordinary teardown. This is a house with a storied past.
The lawn started at the beach and ran toward the front door for a 1/4 of a mile, jumping over sundials and brick walks and burning gardens.
You can almost hear the echoes of better days, so beautifully captured in what many consider the great American novel, F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. Lore has it that this house, called Land's End, fired Fitzgerald's imagination.
Well, it's exciting. People in town think it's exciting. Right. They come by boat, they look at the house, they say, this is the Great Gatsby house.
Built by a newspaper editor in 1902, the 21,000-square-foot house in the village of Sands Point hosted the likes of Winston Churchill and Albert Einstein. It's said the grand parties caught Fitzgerald's attention.
Just picture, the moon out, right. the band playing, all the people dancing and mingling around.
Today it's owned by real estate developer Bert Brodsky.
It's almost like not real. Mm-hmm. It's almost like a fantasy land. Right. Like you read about it and say, no, nobody could really live like this.
And yet they did.
They did.
Brodsky and his son David bought the property 7 years ago, but the upkeep on the $18 million house proved too costly.
So it's officially condemned, is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Right. Remarkable. Almost like you can smell the other time, another era.
The home was one of the few remaining relics, hearkening back to Fitzgerald's time on Long Island during the Roaring '20s.
The Great Gatsby was the novel of its time.
Ruth Pergozzi is the executive director of the F. Scott Fitzgerald Society. She says no place symbolized the Roaring '20s better than what was known as the Gold Coast of Long Island, with its elegant estates like the Guggenheim's Hempstead House, now a museum.
That just really takes my breath away.
What did this strip of land here represent?
Oh, I think this represented the epitome of everything you could strive for, everything you could want. You had optimism. You had a sense of what America was, the possibility of America, and you all had it all embedded in one place.
Do you feel like this home would represent the grandeur of the Gold Coast?
I feel that this home is the Gold Coast.
It was that grandeur that drew a young F. Scott Fitzgerald and his Southern belle wife, Zelda, to the area in 1922.
Scott Fitzgerald was in his 20s
Yes.
when he wrote The Great
Yes.
Gatsby.
Mhm.
Extraordinary.
How do you do, old sport? I'm Gatsby.
As seen in the 1974 film starring Robert Redford, the novel tells the story of a Wall Street trader named Nick Carraway, who rents a summer cottage next to the mysterious Jay Gatsby, who's famous for his lavish parties.
The bar is in full swing, and floating rounds of cocktails permeate the garden outside until the air is alive with chatter and laughter and casual innuendo and introductions forgotten on the spot.
If you read one of the party scenes in The Great Gatsby, it is a compression of everything that's going on at that time.
At twilight, Fitzgerald would sit on this porch, gazing across the bay with writer Ring Lardner toward grand parties.
And they loved to talk about the rich people and the people coming to the parties.
And they could see them.
And they could see it across the way, and they loved to talk about that.
Fitzgerald left Long Island before The Great Gatsby was published in 1925.
It's so perfectly written, there isn't one sentence that you could take out.
F. Scott Fitzgerald died in 1940 at age 44. But his memory remains on the Gold Coast of Long Island, even as the landmarks that dot Gatsby country continue to disappear. Despite protests from historical groups, Bert Brodsky says they had no choice but to tear down the dilapidated house. They plan to build 5 homes on the property in a community called Seagate at Sands Point.
Is it still a little bit of a sad day for you?
It's definitely a sad day. Yeah. Life goes on. It's kind of a life cycle.
He says they're respectful of days gone by and the book that still takes us there.
So we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past.